Hello again, people. I'm back again with another video called The Legal Aid Fraud in the Family Court Exposed. In order to expose the legal aid fraud that is going on in the family court, I have to go back to before 2012, when if you was part of a family court proceedings as two parties, you would be granted legal aid. This was abolished. And what was brought in was the Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act 2012. You see, before this, there was a budget of $2 billion that was being spent in legal aid. So they wanted to cut back, and one of the areas that they cut back on was the family court. Now, after LASPO, as it is called, to abbreviate it, was brought in, you can still get legal aid, but you can only get legal aid for certain cases. And one of those cases is if you can prove that there has been domestic violence, harm to the children. They're the main two, which I'm going to focus on. In fact, I'm not going to focus on harm to children because obviously it's the domestic violence angle that was being pushed. Now, one thing I wanted to say before I go on is that prior to LASPO, the amount of people who were going for legal aid was 60% women and 40% men. After LASPO, that percentage changed dramatically. It went up to 85% women, 15% men. And there was a 300% increase in the domestic violence claims that went in. 300% increase. Why is this? Well, what's happened is that the system, barristers, solicitors and the legal profession in general, took a loss when this happened. They stopped being able to get their pockets filled. So what they've done is they've found a way in order to unleash the legal aid budget still. But they're focused on this area of domestic violence. Now, as I said just a minute ago, if you could prove legal aid, prove domestic violence. Now, the only way to prove that you've had domestic violence happen to you is police records, medical records. Now, there are very rare examples, there will be a few, where women have been abused, and men, possibly, because men do get abused too, who have no evidence, never been to a doctor, and also no police records. But it's a very rare thing because, you know, there's usually evidence of domestic abuse. So, in lieu of the police records and the medical records, which are primary and would be primary in any criminal case if you're trying to prosecute somebody for domestic violence, what they did was they decided to bring in the non-molestation order, because if a non-molestation order was in place, straight away you would be able to open the floodgates of the money. The legal aid certificate would be granted. At the time when I was accused of the rape, it was around the 9th of March of that year, 2015. The case had been running for a little while by now. And the mother of my children had a legal aid emergency payment. And I knew that it had come to an end because her team, her corrupt team, could not put in a statement when it was due to be in. And I thought to myself, sitting there, that, oh, we're back on the same level now. I haven't got representation, she hasn't got representation. Only for 2 weeks did I have representation, because the first day a solicitor came with me, I was paying, cost me just under £1,000 for him to come for 1 day. Then he would be on the phone to me asking for another 600 and tell me that he's read a piece of paper, sent an email and this and that, and he needs some money on account. I did that a few times, 600, 500, 200. And after that I thought, well, wait a minute. Nothing's happened now. Nothing's happened in the case. I can't live like this, feeding this man with money. And I won't even go into that side of stuff. But anyway, let's get back to the point. There was a hope in her team's activity because the emergency budget had run out. I went to court. Then I heard the allegations. At court, when the allegations were put in front of the judge, and the act that this was the most violent stuff, allegations that we've ever heard, was being played out in the courtroom, and me in my stunned state, it was shocking to hear the judge say, well, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have a finding of fact. And then they sat around, the barristers were trying to find out when they would be free, their schedule. The judges were looking at the schedule. And as they were looking, every time they'd say, okay, I will be available in September. And it just kept going back and back. The dates just kept going back. So it was a long wait for this finding of fact to happen. And this is what they do. They put these allegations in place in order to extend the length of the case, knowing that they'll reap massive amounts of money once the legal aid budget is granted. But they need the molestation order in place. Now, a molestation order can be put in place just on the simple fact of a woman may say, I was abused, I don't know when it was, but I felt intimidated, and I think I'll be intimidated again. That's all it takes. In my case, it was the allegations of 10 years of rape, so she said. And the judge put it in place, the non-molestation order in place. Once that went in place, the money came. And statements started flowing. And the power of the legal profession clicked into place. Now I'm going to read a little bit from a report done by the Human Rights Association. I don't know if that's totally correct. It's a human rights body. Yeah, but you can't expect me to remember everything. Let me read this to you. And this is about criticisms of LASPO and access to justice. I've already made it clear that once one party is funded and the other party isn't, that is equality right there. And usually it's the men who are not funded in the case. That means basically they're lambs to the slaughter. And that's why, even last night I was talking to somebody who was talking about suicide, the suicide rates of men in family courts. That's going to be another video. But wait, LASPO has attracted considerable criticism about potential and actual impacts on access to justice. The Law Society concluded that LASPO has harmed access to justice, placed a strain on the judicial system, and resulted in knock-on costs elsewhere in the public sector. The BAT Commission also criticised LASPO's impact on access to justice, calling for a newly enforceable right of access to justice. Amnesty International reported that LASPO had resulted in a two-tier legal system, open to those that could afford it but closed to those who could not. The findings in these, as well as present study, raise concerns that LASPO has the effect of preventing necessary litigation, and rather than discouraging unnecessary litigation across all areas of law. Mentions unnecessary litigation, and that's what prevails in the family court system. They want to litigate for as long as possible in a family court proceedings because they know that the amount of money that they can reap in a long protracted case is massive. I would love to know how much the barristers were able to reap from the case, my case alone. Now, in all court proceedings, we have what's known as Article 6 of the Human Rights Convention, and that means that fairness is paramount. Everybody has the right to a fair trial. That's what it is, Article 6. Article 6 goes out the window. The amount of times I spoke to the judge in my first case about Article 6 and told him that my Article 6 rights were being violated, he didn't care. They don't care. Because in practice in the courts, whether it be the criminal courts or the family courts, Article 6 is irrelevant. because the very system, two-tier system, some that can afford it, some that can't. Now, in terms of the way the non-molestation order is being used, not only does it give access to massive amounts of money for the barristers in the family court, if anybody breaches a non-molestation order, it isn't settled in the civil court, the family court, it's settled in the criminal court. So the family court is actually feeding the criminal courts, feeding criminal lawyers, and then we look at the bigger system. And you have to ask yourself, the judges care, the judges know what's going on. Yeah, they do. They're complicit because they were barristers. They came up doing the same thing. And now they know the tactics that are going on around them, but are they doing anything about those tactics? Not a chance. But let's go back to the reports quickly. Impact on protected groups. Significant evidence suggests that the legal aid is not being targeted at those who need it most. In 2015, the Equality and Human Rights Commission published a report with evidence of a disproportionate impact on disabled people and ethnic minorities and women. Amnesty International noted a disproportionate impact on disadvantaged groups, including vulnerable young people, migrants and refugees, and people with additional vulnerabilities such as those with mental health conditions, learning difficulties, low numeracy, literacy levels, language problems, medical conditions such as terminal illness, and alcohol and drug dependency. Now, what's very, very interesting and powerful about that statement is that we know that many people within the family court system are suffering from mental health issues because of the protracted nature of the family court proceedings. And as I mentioned, you know, the amount of people that take their lives while going through the family court process is phenomenal. We also know that on the criminal side now, people, disadvantaged sections of the society are being warehoused in prison. People with mental health issues, homeless people, and young people. The exclusion rate from school is increased, and there seems to be a nice and easy path from schools into the prisons. Now, the main people that are vulnerable in all this system are the children. And it is ultimately the children that are being exploited. Now in Lancashire, where I'm from, or where the case was run, I'm from Manchester, but Lancashire was the place that I was living when this all happened, so the case was run in Lancashire. We have a cartel of people, criminals basically, in the legal profession. And one of the chambers which is highly implicated in this whole thing is Winkley Square Chambers. And it says on their website that they will abide by the Bar Society's codes and conducts. No, they won't. Because criminal activity is endemic in your profession. An example of this is how so-called family court experts are used, and I wanted to go into this again in a deeper thing. This will blow you away. How family court experts are used and paid to give fabricated reports, false reports, in order to get the outcome in the case that they want. Now, I'm going to bring this to a close, but the last body that is very much implicated in the fraud couldn't happen without them. Kafkas. Kafkas hold the key to these cases. They are the family court advisors. They advise the court as to the issues that are prevalent in the case. So if there is domestic violence, they also have the keys to the records, you know, such as police evidence or medical evidence. From the outset of a case, the Kafkas office will have a narrative in place of how they're going to play this out. And if they're going down the domestic violence route, and they will know whether it's correct or not. Oftentimes, we're talking about the false allegations and how money's generated in the family court. Oftentimes they know, and they're complicit. Don't forget they have a fund too to use. And they will have used the same characters in hundreds of cases, time and time again. So the act that goes on is well rehearsed and plays out in the same manner. What you will find in many of these cases are the same things coming up again and again. Allegations of rape. They use the allegation of rape in the family court context. I told you earlier in the other video that I did why a mother might use these allegations, but I'm all to do with narcissism and stuff like this. Video coming on narcissism. Why it's useful in the family court now is because it's hard to prove. The issues will be very convoluted. It'll be one person against the other, and they love that because what they do is they set up a chessboard. They don't enter the board, but they put both parents on the board in order to fight each other, and then they will arm one parent with ammunition in order to annihilate the other parent. It's a terrible system. And a friend the other night was talking about how you follow the money, and very, very on point person. They were also saying about the fact that the mediation system has been brought into place in order to stop these protracted cases happening, but mediation doesn't work because the barristers, the corrupt barristers and solicitors bypass that by the false molestation allegations and the false rape allegations, and of course the non-molestation order that comes into place and sets the ball rolling for the money to be freed. I want you to think about this stuff, and I'm going to be doing a video, as I say, on narcissism because it's important to know how narcissists work in a way, especially for those people like me who didn't know that the person they were with was a narcissist, even though one time somebody told me. Didn't have any faith in that person. Why? Because the person was connected to the narcissist. I'm out. Elevai TV. Truth TV. Can't leave the truth out. Elevai Truth TV. Boom!